What is up, math superstars? In this edition of Mr. Peterson Presents, we are in part 3 of working with circle graphs. This is all about how we can go ahead and interpret circle graphs. So in this video, make sure you have a calculator handy as you will need it to gather some data. So here in our first graph, we're given this circle graph. It says some students were surveyed on career paths they would like to pursue after graduation. And the results are shown in this circle graph. So we have here, now we have education as 10%, medical's 30%, or law enforcement folks are at 10%, entertainment had 30% of the people, and for those that are undecided, not sure, some other random job they would like to do, they're in the other category here. And so the data also tells us that there were a total of 300 students that participated in this survey. So we're going to go ahead and fill out some data here that's going to help us to figure out how many students were in each category. And so the data that we know that there are 300 students. So that's going to go all the way in our data category. We can say that number is going to be 300. We don't know the other data yet, but we're given some percents. So let's work with that and figuring out the rest of our information here. And so we have education. So we find education is right here. So education is 10%. So I'm writing that in the percentage column. Medical's at 30%. Law or entertainment is at 30%. Law enforcement is at 10%, and our other folks are at 20%. And so if we were going to add all these together, that gives us a nice percent as 100%. So what we're going to do now, in order to figure out what our ratio is and eventually our data, let's go ahead and change our percent to a decimal. So what we're going to do is we put our decimal point at the end, we move it 2 places to the left to get our decimal. And so when we do that, our decimal for 10% is 0.1. Our decimal for medical is 0.3. And if you wanted to, you can add the 0 at the end. That's fine, but realize you don't really need it when writing the decimal. So entertainment, 0.30. Law enforcement 0.10, and other is 0.20. When we add all these together, it should give us a nice whole number of 1. So when we figure out our ratio here, we're going to save that for the end because we need some data first that's going to help us. So in order to figure out how many people were in each category, what we're going to do is we're going to take the decimal. So our decimal, say for entertainment, is 0.10. And we're going to go ahead and multiply that by using our total here. Our total is 300. So when we do 0.1 times 300, that gives us, there were 30 students who chose education. So our medical folks, 0.30 times 300. So make sure you write this in your notes because when you do your classwork, it'll be useful information for you. So our total for medical is 90 students. Entertainment, we just did that with medical. It should also give you 90 students. So law enforcement was 0.10 times 300. That gives us 30 students. And our other category of 0.20 times 300 should give us 60 students. So you can see we have this lovely data here. We have these totals: 30 students, 90 students, 90 students, 30 students, and 60 students. And when we add all those together, it gives us a grand total of 300 students. So now, let's go ahead and figure out our ratio. Our ratio is just the category group over the total. And so for education would be 30 over 300. Then we have medicals 90 over 300. And then we have entertainment is 90 over 300. Law enforcement's 30 over 300. And our other is 60 over 300. And for the sake of this video, we're not gonna go ahead and simplify, but we're gonna keep it at 300 over 300. So now we're going to cover some different types of problems using circle graphs here. And so we're given some key information here. Make sure you read all the parts that we're looking for. So the first 200 visitors, so we're going to highlight, underline 200 visitors to the state park were asked about their favorite park activity. The results shown in the circle graph. So we have different things. Camping obviously received the most votes. Fishing received the least votes. That's a shame because I like to fish. And then you have swimming and hiking. They both received about the same. It looks like they're both about a quarter of the votes. And so we got to figure out which of the following is closest to the number of these 200 visitors total who said that hiking was their favorite activity. And so let's go ahead and highlight hiking right here. We can say that hiking is about 25% of our circle graph here. And so we'll kind of say that because 25% makes a nice 90-degree angle right there. And so for hiking, what we can do is we can take our decimal form of that is 0.25 times 200. And that gives us a lovely total. We could say that 50 people like to go hiking as their activity of choice. So now what happens if you're given a bar graph and then you're asked to figure out which circle graph best matches the bar graph? So here we go. Let's figure this out together. So it says the 6th grade class held elections for class president. And the graph, this graph right here, shows our election results. And so we can see that our friend Rayma right here was our winner. She received 120 votes. Our friend Ishmael, he received 80 votes here, the total number of votes. And then you have Juan and Haley. They both received, it looks like they both received 50 votes here. And so the question is asking, a question right here. So our question is which circle graph best represents the same data? And so we have to figure out which one shows that Rayma had the most votes, that Ishmael had the second amount of votes, and that our friends Juan and Haley both have the same percentage. So let's go ahead and take a look at these graphs here. So we take a look at graph A. Graph A shows us that yes, Rayma was in first, and then it looks like Ishmael was second. And our friends Haley and Juan, it looks like they have the same amount. So we can see that letter A would be our answer, but let's take a look at the other ones here, just for the sake of this video. So in letter B, it looks like that Rayma, our friends Rayma and Ishmael, they both received the same amount of votes. So in this case, we know that's not true from our bar graph, so we cross that out. What about letter C? Letter C shows us that Ishmael received the most votes, which didn't happen. Sorry, Ishmael. But we'll cross that out because that circle graph doesn't match. And last but not least, we have this letter D. This shows us that Rayma was in first, so that's good. Our next biggest piece is Haley, which we know that Haley came in third. She didn't come in second, so that didn't happen. Sorry, Haley. So we're only left with letter A as an option. So this is a really easy way, when you're given a bar graph, to figure out which circle graph best represents the data. So now you might see something like this. So that we have the number of species living in the Brookhaven Zoo is provided with this bar graph below. So the circle graph represents all the different ratios of the particular species to the total number of animals in the zoo. And so let's take a look at our bar graph here. And so we can see that our bar graph, there are 40 monkeys in the zoo. We can say that there are 30 zebras, 20 elephants, and just 10 lions. And so what we need to do is we need to figure out in our circle graph, what does this piece right here, what does that piece represent? And so let's go ahead and take a look at this here. So we know that our biggest piece has to be our friends, the monkeys. And so our biggest piece is this green piece. So let's go ahead and label that as the monkeys. We know that our smallest piece are the lions. So that's going to be the purple piece. So let's go ahead and label that with the lions. Yours probably isn't purple because it's black and white, but in the sake of the video, it's purple. So then we got two pieces left. We have elephants and we have zebras. And we know that zebras should be the biggest piece left over here. So zebras, it looks like should be the red piece. These are zebras. And elephants is the blue piece here. So we found that missing part. The question mark. This red piece right here belongs to the zebras.